When a young woman sets out on a cross-country road trip, it seems like it would have been a great getaway from her recent hardships in life. But when her car is found abandoned and she is missing, an investigation starts. Was she seeking solitude in the mountains, or did she encounter something more sinister? Join us as we delve into the enigma of the woman's disappearance, a case that has baffled investigators for over 2 decades. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine-chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forest to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm your host, Elise, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining in today. Now, if you're listening today on the 25th, I am still recovering from my mom's visit. I don't have any updates because I am pre-recording this. And immediately after my mom leaves, my friend Ashley from Colorado is coming, and we are going to do some hiking in the Uintas. So very, very busy June for me, but very grateful to have this time off to go out and explore more. Today's case takes place in the North Cascades National Park, or like the Mount Baker area. There are some conflicting reports, so I just chose to go with North Cascades because most of the information I found online talks about it happening in the North Cascades. Now, if you've ever been to North Cascades National Park, you know just how magical and serene it is. I first visited this national park in 2021 and again in 2022 when I was living in the Pacific Northwest while doing travel healthcare. My husband and I did a van life road trip and camped in this national park for a few days to enjoy hiking around, and I actually kayaked on Ross Lake. The second time we visited, we had our engagement pictures made near Diablo Lake. So let's do some negative reviews. Somebody named Hillbilly Jeff left a Google review that says, "Got mauled by a grizzly, 1 out of 10 wouldn't recommend." Someone else said, "Creepy place." Dean said, "Too many mountains, trees, snow, etc. Made me want to go to the beach." Another negative review, someone said, "Inconvenient parking," which that's such a strange review to leave about a national park. Joyita said, "Good, only good, nothing awe-inspiring," which is absolutely wild that that was said about North Cascades because I think it is very awe-inspiring. North Cascades National Park was established on October 2nd, 1968. It's approximately 100 miles northeast of Seattle and covers over 500,000 acres. In 2022, it was reported to have just over 30,000 visitors, making it one of the least visited national parks in America. North Cascades National Park is almost entirely protected as wilderness, so the park has few structures, roads, or other improvements. Visitors wishing to drive to a campground must do so in the adjacent national forests or national recreation areas. Camping inside the park requires hiking in by trail, horseback, or boat, and camping is regulated by a permit system to ensure that the wilderness is not overexploited. There are more than 500 lakes and ponds located within this park. There are hundreds of creeks and streams, and several rivers originate within the park. With approximately 312 glaciers, North Cascades National Park has the most glaciers of any U.S. park outside of Alaska, and a third of all the glaciers in the lower 48 states. The North Cascades National Park Complex glaciers covered an expanse totaling 27,000 acres as of 2009. And do I think that those numbers have gone down since 2009? Yes, but this is the most updated information that I found. One interesting thing about North Cascades is it's got a pretty high death rate. It's been called the deadliest national park in America because the park has had 3.7 deaths for every 100,000 visitors from 2007 to 2021, more than 3 times the rate of the next deadliest site, which is Wrangell St. Elias National Reserve in southern Alaska. A lot of these deaths aren't murders or anything like that. It's actually a lot of climbers that fall because of how wild this place is. There's a lot of mountaineering and rock climbing. So a lot of these deaths are people plunging from mountains or fatally wounded by falling rock and ice. The park does not allow anchors in the stone for climbers, so it makes it even riskier. This park during the winter has some pretty gnarly weather, and snow covers the ground more than 6 months out of the year, even at the lower elevations. And the main highway that goes through it, which is the only one that goes through it, is State Route 20, and it's generally closed from late November until late April. There are numerous avalanche chutes and lots of fires in this area. And in fact, when I was visiting the first time, we had planned to go out Route 20 so that we could travel the entire way up and through the park, but it was actually closed a ways down the road because of a wildfire in 2021. There are lots of animals that live here, and this park actually has 75 mammal species, around 21 species of reptiles and amphibians, roughly 200 species of birds, 28 species of fish, and a lot of bugs, so over 500 types of land insects, and approximately 250 aquatic invertebrate species. The mammals include the gray wolf, fisher and wolverine, Columbia black-tailed deer, otters, cougars, bobcats, marmots, pikas, and a lot of the birds are like bald eagles, ospreys, peregrine falcons, and then the smaller kind of mountain songbirds. There are over 1,600 vascular plant species that have been identified in the park's 8 different life zones. So because of the 8 different life zones, plant life in the North Cascades is extremely varied. You're going to find different plants at different land zones. So of course there's alpine tundra. Once you get past the timberline, there's hardly any, there's no trees at all. So you have a bunch of small shrubs and grasses. It's a very, very pretty national park with lots of wildflowers, grass, and lichens. Human history in the North Cascades National Park and the surrounding regions begins 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, just after the end of the last glacial period. The region was first settled by Paleo-Indian Native Americans, and by the time European American explorers arrived, it was inhabited by the Skagit tribes. By the early 19th century, the region was visited by fur trappers, and several British and American companies vied for control over the fur trade in this area. And speaking of furry animals, North Cascades National Park has management plans in place to return grizzly bears to the park, but not wolves, as the latter is seen to likely reestablish themselves naturally over time. The park is a prime habitat for grizzly bear, but the species were basically annihilated from the region by 1860. Only 2 grizzly bear sightings occurred in the decade before 2015, and these were outside of park boundaries, and so this was in Canada, just right above this place. Now, when I looked online about this case, I saw varying reports on where exactly the car was located. Some things said in North Cascades National Park, and some things said no, not in North Cascades National Park. So the other place that was mentioned where the car was found was in the Mount Baker National Forest. And I want to talk about that area because I couldn't find anything definite as to which was the correct location. Mount Baker National Forest was established as the Washington Forest Reserve on February 22nd, 1897, with over 3.5 million acres. It became a national forest on March 4th, 1907, and was then renamed Mount Baker National Forest on January 21st, 1924. Snoqualmie National Forest was established from land in the Washington National Forest on the 1st of July, 1908, with almost a million acres. Now, these two were administratively combined in 1974. Fun fact about this area, the 1935 version of The Call of the Wild with Clark Gable, Loretta Young, and Jackie Oakey was filmed on location in the Mount Baker National Forest because 20th Century Pictures felt it was remote enough to guarantee lack of interruption from skiers and other forest visitors. It has a total of over 1.7 million acres. It includes 10 wildernesses, and this forest is also rich in lakes with about 800, mostly in the alpine areas. There are more than 1,500 miles of hiking trails, including portions of the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail. The forest also provides ample opportunities for hunting, fishing, skiing, snowmobiling, snowshoeing, river rafting, birdwatching, berry picking, picnicking, and sightseeing. 19 federally recognized tribes still utilize areas of the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest that were once inhabited or used by their ancestors. They, along with interest groups such as environmentalists, recreationists, and timber industry representatives, they all take an action and an active interest in the management of the forest and its resources. I have hiked in the Mount Baker National Forest as well, and it is so lush and so beautiful. And in fact, the summer that I went, it was a very heavy snowpack year. And so a lot of the trails that I had planned to do were still completely covered with snow, like multiple feet of snow. So I was not able to do the ones that I had planned, but I was able to do some other really, really easy ones with my husband. We did Picture Lake, and so you get a really good view of Mount Shushkatan. I hope I'm saying that right, Shushkatan. And it was just really, really pretty. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about North Cascades National Park and a little bit about the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest, let's dive into the case today. Leah Toby Roberts was born on July 23rd, 1976 in the suburbs of Durham, North Carolina. She has a sister, Kara, and a brother, Heath. When Leah was 17, her father was diagnosed with a chronic lung illness. As Leah got older, she began college at North Carolina State University in nearby Raleigh, majoring in Spanish and anthropology. But during her sophomore year, her mother died suddenly from heart disease. Soon after, in the fall of 1998, Leah was involved in a serious car accident that resulted in a punctured lung and a shattered femur. Surgeons implanted a metal rod next to her femur to help it heal. Leah told her sister Kara that she felt born again after her recovery, and in the spring of the next year, just 3 weeks before she was scheduled to leave for Costa Rica for a field program, Leah's father died. She decided to continue with the program. Since she was leaving the country and no longer had any living parents, Leah granted Kara power of attorney over her bank accounts. This was done sort of just as a formality. If you know anything about like leaving, the earth, you kind of have to do a lot of paperwork and prepare for that to happen. And if you don't, things can get really messy. So Leah granted her sister power over attorney just in case anything happened while she was gone. And it kind of just gave a little bit of security to Leah at this time. Against the wishes of her older siblings, Leah dropped out of the university only months before completing her degree. I can understand why her siblings were probably pretty upset about this. If she were only a few months away from completing that degree, it kind of just feels like that time was maybe wasted if she could have gone a few more months and then had her bachelor's. But I can sympathize with people that do that because I went to school for 6 years. I got a bachelor's and a master's back to back, and it's grueling and it's long and it's hard and it's not for everyone. Well, after Leah dropped out of school, she learned how to play the guitar, took up photography, and adopted a pet kitten she named Bee, like BEA. And some people might say, well, that's Bea. Well, I've heard it both ways, so I'm just going to say Bee. She also began spending time in local coffee houses, writing poetry about the meaning of life, and making new friends. With one, Janine Quiller, and her roommate, Nicole Bennett, Roberts discussed the idea of emulating Beat Generation novelist Jack Kerouac and going on a road trip out west. So she talked about going out west with her friend and roommates and just kind of said that she would like to do it. She had recently been reading Jack Kerouac and was very inspired by his time spent on the road, and specifically out in Washington. On the morning of March 9th, 2000, Leah talked on the phone with Kara about her uncertain future plans. She was really just trying to figure out who she was and what she wanted to do with her life. That conversation ended with the understanding that the two would see each other again soon. Later in the early afternoon, Leah and her roommate Nicole agreed to do some babysitting together the next day. Nicole left for work and returned later, at which point she noticed that Leah and her 1993 white Jeep Cherokee, they were both missing. Because Leah had not maintained a consistent schedule since she dropped out of school, Nicole was really not concerned initially that Leah was gone. She just thought Leah would show up and maybe she was out at a coffee house or something. The next day, Leah missed the babysitting appointment. And by the end of March 11th, Leah was still gone and her friends and family had been attempting to contact her. On March 13th, Kara, Leah's sister, reported Leah missing to the Durham police. The next day, on March 14th, Kara and Leah's roommate Nicole searched Leah's room. Many of Leah's clothes and her kitten Bee were missing. Kara and Nicole also found a note reading, quote, "I'm not suicidal, I'm the opposite," end quote. And then it mentioned Jack Kerouac and included a drawing of the Cheshire Cat's grin. And the Cheshire Cat is the cat from Alice in the Wonderland that can disappear and reappear. Along with a note, Kara and Nicole found a bunch of cash totaling approximately a month's worth of Leah's share of rent and expenses. So Leah obviously left on her own volition, left a note, and left money for them to take care of her rent and expenses. But it was only for a month. So while everyone was kind of freaking out and worried, I think when they found the note, because she said, "I'm not suicidal, I'm the opposite," they were probably a little less worried, but still wondering where Leah was at. Now, since Kara still had power of attorney over Leah's bank accounts, she was able to access her sister's financial records. She discovered that Leah had withdrawn several $1,000s on the afternoon of March 9th, and that her debit card had been used to pay for a motel room near Memphis, Tennessee. There were other transactions that were for food or gas, their locations suggesting that Leah was traveling west along Interstate 40, then north on Interstate 5 after she reached I-40's western end in California. The last activity on Leah's bank accounts was a gas purchase shortly after midnight on the morning of March 13th in Brooks, Oregon. Keep in mind, that's the same day that she was reported missing by her sister. Police later recovered security camera footage from the gas station, which showed her alone and apparently in good condition although several times she peered out into the parking lot while waiting for her transaction to be completed. Now, I don't really think this is too, I don't know, weird. I sometimes, when it's not hot outside, my dog will be in the car if I'm getting gas with the windows cracked. And yeah, I make sure I look back. And if her cat, her little kitten B, was in the car, she would definitely be looking just to make sure that everything's all kosher over there. Early on the morning of March 18th, 2000, in Washington state, a couple jogging along Canyon Creek Road, a side route of the Mount Baker Highway, noticed articles of clothing at the side of the road next to a slight curve at the top of a slope. Some pieces of clothing had been tied to the tree and branches at the roadside. That is really weird. In the woods below, at the bottom of a steep embankment, the couple discovered Leah's severely damaged Jeep and called the police. Leah was not present at the scene. Now, of course, they didn't know whose car this was, but you and I know that it was later deemed to be Leah's Jeep. Based on the path that the car had taken through the trees and the extent of damage to the vehicle, investigators from the Washington State Patrol determined that the Jeep had been traveling at nearly 40 miles per hour when it went off the road and down the slope. The contents of the vehicle were tossed around inside, consistent with a multiple rollover. Investigators found no blood or other signs of injury to say that there was anyone inside at the time. There was no, blood. There wasn't really anything to say that the person that was in it was injured. These investigators concluded that no one had been inside the Jeep when it crashed, suggesting that the accident may have been staged. Blankets and pillows were hung inside the windows of the Jeep, suggesting it may have been used as a shelter after being wrecked. Robert's passports, checkbook, driver's license, clothes, guitar, CDs, and other belongings were found scattered in the surrounding woods. Bits of cat food and a small cat carrier were found in the vehicle, confirming that Leah had taken B on the trip with her, although the cat was not found at the scene either. Valuables such as $2,500 in cash and jewelry were also left behind, so that says that robbery was not a reason for the accident. After it was deemed it was Leah's car, and word got back to Kara and Heath, they flew to Bellingham to assist investigators. They visited the crash site and, with the assistance of the sheriff's office, created a flyer they posted around in town in Bellingham. They also went to local businesses to ask if business owners and customers had seen Leah. Among her belongings, her siblings found a box of mementos from the trip that had established more of a clear timeline of her travels. She had a ticket stub from March 13th afternoon showing of American Beauty at the theaters in Bellingham's Bellis Fair shopping mall. This ticket suggested that Leah may have spent a few hours in the city after arriving at the beginning of the day, following her 5 to 6 hour drive from where she had previously bought gas in Brooks, Oregon. So along with all the things that were found in and around her car, they were able to kind of put together a timeline and go around and ask people if they had seen her. And with a more established timeline, they kind of had a better idea of maybe what she was doing or what her plans were. Near the theater was the mall's only sit-down restaurant, where both of her siblings believed that Leah might have gone for a meal. When police interviewed people in the restaurant, 2 customers actually had information about Leah. Both men indicated they had met Leah in the restaurant on March 13th, where they had sat on each side of her at the restaurant's counter. The men recalled talking with Leah about Jack Kerouac and her planned road trip. One of the men claimed that Leah had left with a third man, whom he heard her call Barry, and provided a description for police sketch of the man. However, neither the other man nor any customer who had been in the restaurant at the time could corroborate the third man's existence. Now, I find this to be a little strange that this happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen because obviously these two men did see Leah, but I just think it's strange that he said, "Oh, she told us about her future road trip plans." I do a lot of solo traveling, and I would never, ever tell two strange men at a restaurant, two strangers, what I was doing next. I would not say that. It would be very vague because you have to protect yourself as a woman, especially a woman who's solo traveling. Another part of me is wondering where her cat was during all of this when she was at the movies, because obviously cats are not allowed in movie theaters, and where her cat was when she was eating dinner at this restaurant. That I don't think that question's ever been answered. So it makes me believe maybe she had a hotel room or stayed somewhere that she could leave her cat. We just don't know where that was. A few days after the Jeep was discovered, a man called the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office to report a sighting. He claimed that his wife had seen Leah, disoriented and confused, wandering around a gas station in Everett, which is closer to Seattle. After disclosing this information, he seemed to panic and hung up before identifying himself. Police nevertheless consider the tip credible. For 2 weeks in April 2000, police searched for Leah near her Jeep's crash site. They had cadaver dogs, metal detectors, and helicopters all in use along with people on foot, but no new evidence was discovered. Now, the reason they had metal detectors is so that they could try and find the metal rod in her leg. They were assuming that she had an accident and maybe was deceased. Investigators continued to examine the Jeep, joined by the FBI, who had become involved because Leah had crossed state lines. This to me is a little fishy because a ton of people cross state lines and go missing, and the FBI does not get into every case. So, they found her mother's ring, her mother's engagement ring, which Leah wore constantly, and they found it under the floor mat inside the vehicle. Leah's friends in North Carolina said that she treasured that ring for the connection it offered to her for her late mother, and that she would have never taken it off voluntarily. After this discovery, the investigation stalled. Now, the case kind of went cold. We did have those few sightings, and the ring was found, but there was nothing of Leah to be found anywhere else. Yes, the guys from the restaurant were a little shifty, and yes, we had a guy call in, an anonymous man call in and say that he had seen her, but no one knew where Leah was. So the case kind of went cold. And in 2006, Mark Joseph of the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, he was the one originally on the case, and he passed his files on to two younger detectives. While reviewing Leah's case, one of them noticed that the car and its contents had not been fully processed for evidence when it was originally brought in. After deciding to re-examine the vehicle, investigators pried open the Jeep's hood and found that a wire had been cut, allowing the car to accelerate without anyone having pressed the gas pedal. This discovery confirmed early suspicions that no one had been in the car when it left the road, and thus it had been purposefully wrecked. The detectives also found a fingerprint under the hood of the Jeep and male DNA on an article of Leah's clothing. I just think it's such a tragedy when we have cases like this and the investigators fail. And when I say that they fail, I am not trying to talk shit about law enforcement or how crappy of a job they did, but there are no perfect crimes. There are only failed investigations. And if this stuff was caught earlier, like 6 years earlier, who knows what might have happened? Would Leah be returned home? Or would whoever was responsible for the Jeep wreck be held accountable? I'm just so upset for Leah's family that this was not investigated thoroughly at the time. I just think it's really crazy that there were no checks and balances to make sure that everyone was kind of doing their job correctly and getting all the evidence processed. When the car was the only thing that they really had, why and how did they not send it for full processing? So, uncovering these new leads, they led investigators back to the man who claimed that Leah left the Bellis Fair restaurant with a third man that she called Barry. As no one could corroborate this witness's statements, police fingerprinted and DNA tested him to rule out his involvement in her disappearance. The witness's fingerprints did not match the one discovered under the hood of the Jeep, but the results of the DNA sample have not been disclosed. So, what are some of the theories? Now, there are several theories about the disappearance of Leah. According to Sergeant McFadden, she could have caught a ride with the wrong person after her accident. He said you can't rule out foul play when you don't see somebody for over a year, but there's no evidence to indicate that that has happened. They said they did process the vehicle for your typical evidence like hair fibers and blood, but there was nothing to indicate what happened. Here's another theory. She could be living somewhere with no memory of who she is or where she came from. Or perhaps Leah was inspired by her favorite author, Jack Kerouac, and left her former life behind in one final dramatic gesture. But Leah's family does not think that this is what happened. Her sister said, quote, "I can understand Leah's needing to get away and find some peace within herself. But considering the loss that our families experienced, it's difficult for me to think that she would leave us open for another loss like this." In the media, Leah's case has been featured quite a bit, but not as much as you might expect. In 2001, the Lifetime television series Unsolved Mysteries ran a segment on the case that generated some new tips for investigators and reports that Leah had been sighted elsewhere in the U.S., but nothing proved credible. There were several events started to raise awareness about Leah's case. Kara even went on national television on CNN's Larry King Live in 2005 to discuss the case. Investigation Discovery's Disappeared aired an episode on the case in 2011. As far as media goes, there's really not much about Leah's case or any updates in it since it happened. It went cold so quickly, and that's why I'm so frustrated that the Jeep wasn't fully processed until 6 years later. That is absolutely unacceptable. And I don't know why no one followed up on that, honestly. That is probably, to me, the biggest mess up of this case. Now, there's something interesting I found on Reddit. There was a mummified body found in 2014, and it had a rod in its right femur, just like Leah. And if you know anything about these rods or any sort of medical equipment that is inside your body, they always have a lot number, and they can be traced back to hospital or manufacturer. It's like a VIN for your vehicle, right? But it's inside your body. So when this happened, everybody thought that it was Leah, especially because the lot number was traced, and it was shipped in the fall of 1998 when Leah had her surgery to implant it. But the catch, the mummified body was identified as male, with an age range between 35 to 55. The height was listed at 5'5", and Leah was 5'6". There are a lot of interesting theories about this body. You might think, well, how could they misidentify someone's bones? Apparently, it's kind of an easy thing to do. Some people have suspected that Leah was intersex, but nothing's been confirmed by the family. There have been no updates on this, and the NamUs website for this unidentified body is no longer listed. So they say it's solved, but I could not find anything that said, oh, these remains belong to this man who was missing. Nothing. Someone on Reddit actually found it interesting that the metal rod has been removed from both the unidentified's body description and Leah's description on NamUs. So previously on NamUs, Leah's description included information about the metal rod. And after the discovery of these remains with the metal rod, that information was removed from both profiles. But basically, this is where Leah's case stands today. It has been 25 years, and investigators are still baffled at what happened. No one knows where Leah is. There are so many theories. But if you want my opinion, I think foul play all the way. I think Leah trusted the wrong person because she was a very nice, friendly person. And I think that person did her harm and set up the Jeep crash to make it look like she had been in an accident and got lost in the woods. It's terrible. It's really terrible because Leah's family still needs answers, and there are really no updates in Leah's case. My theory is, like I just said, it was a setup, and that's why no cash or anything valuable was taken, because that was not the motive. The motive was to do harm to Leah, and that's probably exactly what this predator did. It's heartbreaking, and I cannot believe it's been 25 years and there are no updates, at least updates that are made to the public. A lot of people online think that that body that was discovered in the woods with the metal rod is Leah, but someone just misidentified the gender of the person, which I don't know. I'm not an anthropologist, but it is possible to do, or to even confuse DNA. Just recently in Utah, someone that has been missing for 40 years or so, he was just identified through DNA, even though they had his body this entire time because it was a mix-up with the DNA and dental records. So it is very possible that these things do happen. And it makes me question, the competence of the sheriff's department when they didn't even process all the evidence to begin with. I don't mean to shit on law enforcement. I think what they do is meaningful and it's hard work. But at the same time, when these things happen so often in investigations, it's really upsetting. If you have any information on the whereabouts or disappearance of Leah Roberts, please contact the Detective Sergeant of the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office at 360-778-6600, or you can contact the Whatcom Communication Dispatch Center at 360-676-6711. As always, recreate responsibly, and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.